This one comes from the New York Times, and I'll give a brief overview of it, as well as highlight some of what we're thinking about how nonprofits can harness this story to help their own organizations. So, a story came out revealing that a nonprofit founder had been abusing his own organization's resources for years. The catch was that the organization was a crowd-funded police abolitionist and activist organization, which eventually had to involve law enforcement in reining in the actions of its founder. So Brandon Anderson, the founder of Raheem.AI, a nonprofit aimed at police reform and alternatives to the traditional police response infrastructure, think 911 and traditional dispatching, raised millions of dollars in donations based on a compelling personal story, ambitious tech solutions sold by Anderson. He was a great storyteller. However, the organization failed in many, many ways. The organization failed to live up to its promises of creating this tech. Inventing the new 911 is not easy, and this guy certainly hadn't figured it out. Additionally, the story that it was based on, Anderson's downfall eventually came when employees figured out that he was spending lavishly, buying ornate gifts from luxury brands, spending $50,000 on Uber and ride shares, taking luxurious vacations and putting it on the nonprofit's card, despite dangling layoffs over employees' heads, claiming financial hardship. Now, George, we talk a lot about fraud on the podcast. It happens. The nonprofit sector is, I'd say, more ethical and sees less fraud than the business sector, without a doubt. But because of the nonprofit social impact nature, it's going to generate more press, right? It's going to get more attention because it's a little bit of a juicier story. There are 3 conditions for fraud we want to highlight. These conditions were all met by Anderson, and they come from the criminologist Donald Cressy, who identified these 3 conditions that, if present, are likely to increase the chance of fraud, and for your nonprofit are important to be aware of. Condition number 1 is financial pressure, also known as motive or incentive. This could include addiction, living beyond one's means, as Anderson did, spending money lavishly, or an unshareable financial need. Condition number 2 is perceived opportunity. This could include a chance to commit fraud without getting caught. Anderson was able to do this for many years. He essentially operated a long con, building an organization entirely made off of a false story, false narratives, and false promises. Condition number 3 is rationalization, also known as justification or attitude. This could include believing the victim deserved it, the fraud was necessary, or the fraud was harmless. I think there's a chance here that Anderson thought he really might be able to make the world a better place, and he kind of bought into his own lie, I think, in a way that ultimately was detrimental. I think it's not dissimilar from Elizabeth Holmes necessarily, right? Initially setting out to do something good, potentially, but just devolving into lying and lying and lying, eventually becoming fraudulent. So, George, these are the 3 factors to look out for nonprofits trying to prevent and mitigate fraud. What do you make of this story? What more can we offer nonprofits attempting to rein in or identify fraud before it happens, George?
This was it's a sad story. It hurts the credibility. Bad apple spoils the bunch of a larger movement and work when it comes to more responsible policing. It's fairly devastating. The narrative is hard, and you have other players involved along the way. I mean, literally the Times names like folks like the Kresge Foundation writing checks. Nonprofits are tasked with these grandiose visions, and that's not meant to be a dig. Like, literally, you're trying to change the world. You're trying to reinvent things. But there is a point where you have to meet with reality, and recreating 911 for a budget of like less than $4.5 million is just, it's unreasonable in terms of the responsibility and feasibility of something. You cannot recreate 911 on a budget like that with an app, even if you put AI at the end of your name. So there are folks in the room along the way that potentially And the New York Times is not very subtle about it in this article, enabling this. What is the inoculation for governance, for board members? In this governance, what we're pointing towards are when we hear these initial flags, financial pressure. Are there financial pressures involved with the people, the organization, the heads of the accounting department or bookkeeping? This is honestly more often where we see this type of fraud, where it is this one lone hero narratively. Oh, we couldn't run this place without you. Thank you so much for looking over the books. The perceived opportunity, right? This is an idea of friction. If there is less friction, it is more likely the thing is going to happen. This is one area where I think it's important to plant these flags in governance, in your mindset of where is the check and balance? Where is the second set of eyes going through your accounts, either monthly or quarterly? We have the obligation in nonprofits to have third-party accounting firms come in, but I think especially if you are questioning it, especially if you're new, you can say, hey, I'd like all of the sort of expense tagging and flagging done on a quarterly basis, so that first time, right, there was a first moment of potential impropriety for all of these things where, hey, I went to, let's say, Cancun, like, in this story is what happened. And we noticed there was a charge. I'm sure this was an accident, but we caught it last month. So we're just going to need you to, just reimburse the company. I'm sure you just, had the wrong credit card. Oh, yeah, no problem. That totally was an accident. What did I just do? I gave them an out. I caught it immediately, and I added friction. Oh my gosh, everything that I charge this company is going to be checked and questioned. That's fine. We're just asking a question. You cannot have a single point of failure. You cannot have a single person responsible for this sort of accounting and oversight. Can't happen. Don't let it happen. This should be the biggest red flag for anybody in governments or designing a structured system. I myself at Wholewell, there are folks that go through my credit card and my expenses and say, hey, what is that? And not only one, there's an outside firm that goes through it. And also our president goes through and say, hey, George, what's that thing there? And I get an itemized list and I have to be like, yeah, I did this thing. And they're like, well, okay, that's interesting. Are you sure that fits? But by the way, we are a company. We are a LLC, right? As a nonprofit, you don't own that company. I know you're the founder. I know you feel like you're sort of maybe entitled to that, but you don't own it. It's federally illegal to line your pockets with that money outside of the salary and what is approved by the board. The final point of the fraud is rationalization. And this is just a sort of, if you're asking yourself, how could somebody do this? The truth is, a little bit at first and then all at once is the amazing power of our brain to rationalize it. I work so hard for this organization. I'm underpaid for this. I totally deserve this. I'm justifying it with the universe because I worked so hard for this. I'm like constantly thinking about it. No one cares more about this cause than I do. Of course I deserve this. And that part I don't know what to do with, but I do know friction. I think you can add friction. You can add a double check. It breaks my heart every time I see this, but I also inevitably look to governance. And we, I think, are going to push on this narrative. This is out of the 1950s and 70s. Donald R. Cressy, if you want to look it up. Again, financial pressure, perceived opportunity, and then rationalization. That is the narrative of fraud. You don't have to be on the board. You can be anyone in the organization to smell like, hey, it seems like there are a few ingredients here for this. And I'll tell you what, it is much easier to stop a fire when it's just starting with smoke than a full conflagration. When your full kitchen is on fire, it is too late. It is much easier to say, hey, I see a little smoke coming out. Would you mind just sort of explaining what happened here in this last series of expenses? It just confused me. Thanks.